Always trust.
We ask the questions. What is needed in the world?
Rođena je u Mitrovici, podijeljenom gradu po etničkim linijama između Srba na severu i Albanaca na jugu. Obrazovana je u Sjedinjenim Američkim Državama, doktor je pravnih nauka. Vjosa Osmani na parlamentarnim izborima ove godine osvojila je najveći broj glasova u istoriji Kosova. Nakon višegodišnje karijere u kosovskoj politici izabrana je za predsjednicu Kosova sa 5-godišnjim mandatom. Za Recite Al Jazeeri govori Vjosa Osmani.
Madam President, thank you for talking to Al Jazeera. One of your first messages as a president was that Serbia must be held liable for genocide. Why is it necessary to initiate a lawsuit against Serbia in this moment?
This has nothing to do with politics, absolutely nothing. It is our utmost obligation as human beings to not just talk about genocide, but to make sure that there is justice for the victims. If you go around Kosovo, you will see in particular two places where Serbia's intention to exterminate was more than just clear. One is Meja, which was called by many human rights activists as the Srebrenica of Kosovo. If you look at the pattern there, it's exactly the same as what happened in Srebrenica. It was the same intention of dividing young boys and men from their families. They were all civilians, and then in a field they were all executed. And then taken away, many of them are still missing. Many were found in mass graves in Serbia. The second place is Poklek. It's a village where 54 children and elderly women were not just killed, but they were burned down twice after being killed. There was an intention there to not just kill those innocent children as young as 6 months old, but to also wipe them out from the face of the world. Today, all 54 of them are in one grave because it was impossible to identify them. That's how much destruction there was in this country. As an international law professor and as a person that has taught legal issues related to genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity, I know exactly what I'm talking about. So this is not simply my obligation as an institutional leader, as the representative of the people of Kosovo, but I strongly believe it's a moral obligation of every human being in Kosovo, in the region, and wider, to talk about what the crimes of Slobodan Milošević were. Because if we don't, we are doing a great injustice, not just to the victims, to the survivors and their families, but also blocking our way forward towards the future. I strongly believe that the true way and the only path towards reconciliation and long-lasting peace is through justice. You cannot just pretend to sew a deep wound on the skin without actually healing the wound first. And as politicians, it is our job to ask for justice for all of the victims, and at the same time to ask for the perpetrators to be in front of justice. And Serbia, unfortunately, so far, has not made sure that the perpetrators are in front of justice.
How do you see the examples from this region? Macedonia won the case against Greece at the International Court of Justice, but at the end of the dispute, two countries had to sign an agreement.
I am absolutely not ruling out the possibility of an agreement between Kosovo and Serbia, quite the opposite. Kosovo has been working on that since 2011, when the dialogue between the two countries started. But there are a number of extremely important principles that need to be addressed and respected during this process. First of all, the dialogue needs to happen on an equal footing because we're both independent and sovereign countries. Secondly, the dialogue must respect Kosovo's territorial integrity, sovereignty, and its internal functioning and the way how it is built from its constitutional point of view, because we need to avoid other examples like what we were seeing in Bosnia right now. We don't need more destabilization in our region. And thirdly, it must address issues of justice. For us, making sure that we know the whereabouts of the missing persons, that more than 1,600 families in Kosovo know the whereabouts of their beloved, is the top priority in this process. So the process needs to be about the people, not about the political fate of some political leaders, and a nice picture that will be sold to the world as if there is a historic success. The dialogue between Kosovo and Serbia can have historic success at a time where when we find our missing persons, and at a time when Serbia not just respects, but at the same time accepts the reality which is an independent Kosovo. And of course, as far as we're concerned, but as far as most of the region is concerned, Kosovo's independence has brought more stability and peace for the region.
We've heard from U.S. Special Envoy Matthew Palmer. He repeated that mutual recognition is U.S. goal also. In your opinion, would it be possible that the mutual recognition between Kosovo and Serbia to be a realistic and permanent solution?
Well, it is really hard to envisage or to talk on behalf of Serbia. I cannot speak on their behalf, so they have their own elected leaders. But that is not just what we wish and what we want, but it's the only solution, the only final outcome that would bring peace and stability in this region. Because unless Serbia recognizes Kosovo's independence, unless there is mutual recognition that recognizes Kosovo's existence in its current borders, we will only see a Serbia in the future that continues to destabilize the region, and not just Kosovo. They continue to destabilize other countries in our region, and we will see a Serbia that gets closer and closer to Russia rather than the European Union. I think the EU has made it quite clear that Serbia's path towards European integration and joining the EU goes through Kosovo. When they say goes through Kosovo, obviously it goes through the recognition of Kosovo in its current borders. For us, our status has been determined once and forever on the 17th of February 2008.
But Serbian president
but it's
said
about time
that
they recognize this reality.
Yeah, but the Serbian president said that recognition is not a compromise.
In fact, recognition would be a compromise. The mere fact that Kosovo is going to that dialogue table without Serbia never, ever repenting, without Serbia never, ever asking for an apology for all the victims it has caused, without the perpetrators of those horrendous crimes standing in front of justice and getting the punishment that they deserve for these international crimes, we are still sitting on that table. We are still the good neighbor. We are still contributing to good neighborly relations. And for that reason, the compromise is there. Without them paying in front of justice, obviously, for the crimes that they have committed in former Yugoslavia, they are still being able to move forward in their European path. And that is the compromise that we are making. Compromise
is something that both sides need to work on to make some concession. How can Kosovo contribute in these concessions?
As I said, Kosovo is already making a compromise by sitting down with a party that has committed crimes, horrendous crimes, here in our country and has never apologized for them. So that is a compromise in itself. Secondly, we've made a long list of concessions during Ahtisaari, which have brought our country to the brink of non-functionality. And thirdly, there's another long list of big concessions made by Kosovo during all of the 10 years of dialogue between Kosovo and Serbia in Brussels, with more than 30 agreements and additional annexes that have been achieved. For that reason, we now need to sit down and discuss mutual recognition. And at the same time, for us as Kosovo, as I said, it's important to put to light the issue of the missing persons, which is one of the biggest wounds of our society after the war.
Madam President, the average salary in Kosovo and in Serbia also is around 500 euros. How this legal and political process will affect the real life and well-being of the people here in this region?
I think the sooner Serbia recognizes the reality of an independent Kosovo, the better it will be for the entire region to move forward, not just politically and in terms of sustainable peace, but also in terms of sustainable economic development. The rest of the world will see our region as a place where they can securely invest, and the more investment there is, the more new jobs will be, especially for the young generation. So concluding a final deal of mutual recognition will be one of the biggest achievements in terms of creating a future for the generations to come where they don't have these kind of political issues to deal with, but they can discuss regional cooperation in many areas, from innovation to issues of environment and tourism, as well as economic development. So we absolutely owe it to the future generations to conclude a deal that will bring more peace and stability, but at the same time, of course, will see justice for all the victims as a precondition to that peace and stability.
In the last period, we've heard about the circulation of so-called non-paper. Albanian Prime Minister Rama confirmed the existence of this document. Also, some Serbian and politicians from Bosnia and Herzegovina. How do you see the possibility of borders changing, as that paper document was suggesting?
As you know, we have been a strong voice against such dangerous ideas and adventures, because they would be destabilizing not just Kosovo, but the entire region, and in fact beyond our region. For that reason, it is absolutely out of question, and such an idea will not be on the dialogue table. The new institutions of Kosovo that stem from the 14th of February have a clear mandate to not negotiate on issues that relate to borders or Kosovo's sovereignty and internal regulation. We will fully respect that mandate, not just because that's what the people of Kosovo want, but also because history has shown that such dangerous adventures can only bring bloodshed in our region, which we don't want. In addition, I would like to really point out that these non-papers are entirely irrelevant. We should have self-confidence. And because we know that this is a dangerous idea, we don't need a non-paper to tell us what to do. We know what to do. We know what to avoid. And one of the dangerous adventures that we will avoid at any cost is that is related to border changes.
There was an exhibition from young Albanians and Serbs from Kosovo recently under the motto, "We can live together." You come from a divided city, from Mitrovici. How do you see the divisions in Kosovo society today, and do you find these initiatives key for better understanding?
I think one of the main reasons why there's still division is because of the wrong policies and wrong politics. I absolutely would join the young generations of both Kosovo and Serbia in striving to find ways to live together as human beings that contribute to peace and to peaceful solutions. Because there's actually been too much destruction and war in our region, so we owe it to those young people and to their kids in the future to make sure that we only contribute to peace.
You will do, and the government also.
Justice is the precondition. Justice is the precondition to healing. This society needs to heal, and healing is possible if there is justice. We have never asked for revenge. If you meet the mothers of the missing children, they will tell you this: we don't want revenge, we want justice. Once there is justice for all, at that time, peace for the future generations will be possible. And that's why we owe it to them to work so hard to bring justice for the victims of the war, which is still very vivid and very fresh in our minds. It happened just about 20 years ago. We're not talking about the Second World War. We're talking about something that all of us have seen with our own eyes and remember every single day. And that's why we need to make sure that it never happens again, and we all contribute to preventing division. We all contribute to bringing people together. Let me point out that there have been some agreements in Brussels that, in fact, instead of contributing to bringing people together, to living together, to respecting the principle of multi-ethnicity in our constitution, in which I strongly believe, they've contributed to more divisions, to more segregation, to putting Serbs aside from everyone else. That is not the way forward. That's why we will be advocating for solutions that bring people together and at the same time respect the principle of multi-ethnicity, instead of talking about autonomies and divisions that have not shown to be the right choice or the right solutions for our region.
Kosovo citizens are seeking for visa liberalization for a long time now. When might they expect visas to be a history?
Well, unfortunately, that's not an answer that I will be able to give. It's a question that should be addressed primarily perhaps to the President of France and to very few other countries that still have questions on a process on which Kosovo has delivered many years ago. Kosovo has fulfilled double the amount of criteria compared to any other country in the region. We have been deserving of visa liberalization for quite some time, and it is unfortunate that the European Union is being able to deliver on visa liberalization for even countries in Latin America or the Far East, but it has not been able to deliver on Kosovo, which is part of Europe. So for that reason, we of course continue to call on EU member states to positively address this issue as soon as possible, because they are 3 years too late. Of course, we are the most pro-EU country in our region and beyond, in fact. But at the same time, it's about time that the EU keeps their promises. It's about time that they deliver on visa liberalization, because it's also a matter of EU credibility in the region.
What do you expect in terms of further recognition of Kosovo? Russia, China, and few others European countries still haven't recognized Kosovo.
We don't expect Russia to move forward with this at this time, because their aim is to destabilize the region and to increase their influence in the region. But of course, we will be working closely with democratic nations around the world, in Europe and elsewhere, to convince them that Kosovo's independence, as the ICJ stated, is in line with the international, in line with international law. And at the same time, it is the solution that brings stability to the region and beyond. It is the will of the people, and the will of the people of Kosovo should be respected. There are countless arguments which, of course, are in favor of recognizing Kosovo, and we're very happy that so far we've gained the recognition of more than half of the nations around the world, but we still need to continue to work to strengthen our statehood until we become an equal member of the community of nations in international relations. And of course, membership in international organizations is quite an important part of our foreign policy agenda.
Madam President, how do you see the legacy of ex-President Hashim Thaçi and the ex-leaders of Kosovo Liberation Army? Most of them are facing indictments for war crimes.
We have obviously had political differences in the past with Mr. Thaçi and some of the other leaders. However, there's one thing we all agree on. We all jointly contributed to Kosovo's freedom and independence, and that is a contribution that should be recognized. At the same time, of course, you know that it was the Assembly of Kosovo, with their own will, with 2/3 of votes, that has established the specialist chambers, which have to work in line with Kosovo laws and Kosovo's constitution. In that sense, of course, since I'm neither a judge nor a prosecutor, I will not be making political statements about the work of the specialist chambers. It's a legal issue, and we will be expecting its outcome. But I think every one of us needs to understand the contribution that these leaders have given to international justice by voluntarily working with the specialist chambers. And at the same time, I have to emphasize that the Kosovo Liberation Army was an army that stemmed from the people, fought for the liberation of the people of Kosovo, protected the people of Kosovo from the Milosevic aggression. And in that sense, I would put emphasis to the word liberation, because all of its effort was to liberate Kosovo from a genocidal regime.
You're also an army chief now. What is the perspective of Kosovo army regarding the NATO or arming?
The perspective of our army is very clear. It's in NATO, the biggest military and political alliance in the world. It was NATO that saved us from the Milosevic aggression. It is NATO where we aim to be. It's our strategic orientation, and we're working very closely with our US partners as well as other partners at NATO to make sure that we make steps ahead. Our army is going through a transition period right now. Everything is being done in accordance with NATO standards, and we were very proud recently to be part of the EU Defender 21 exercise together with the US military and many other countries in the region.
Some EU and Arab countries have criticized Kosovo for opening its embassy in Jerusalem. Will you stay on the same position?
As you know, this was a decision of the previous government, but I must emphasize that recognition from Israel was an extremely important recognition for Kosovo, since strengthening our statehood, gaining as many recognitions as possible from that region and any other region in the world remains a priority for Kosovo's foreign policy. At the same time, of course, it's very important for us that we remain all of the good relations, we keep the good relations, the diplomatic relations with the countries of the Arab world that have recognized Kosovo and work with others that have not. Kosovo is a peace-loving nation. It aims at having good relations with all other peace-loving nations around the world, and we will be working in that respect.
You are the second female leader of Kosovo. In your inauguration speech, you've sent a message to young women and girls to follow their dreams. How do you see women in Kosovo society today?
A great achievement has been made in politics, with the highest number of women in the parliament, with the highest number of women in the government, and with the women as president. However, this is not enough. Women in Kosovo, just like anywhere else in the world, are still facing discrimination in many areas of life. So we should be happy only at the time when me sitting in my chair here and many other politicians in their respective positions is used at the benefit of breaking barriers in all areas of life, and is used at the benefit of removing these barriers and problems that the women in Kosovo are facing. So we will be working together with one another, as well as together with men champions that are in favor of gender equality as a precondition for true freedom in this country, in order to make sure that we deal with the most acute problems of lack of equality that all women in our society are facing.
Madam President, thank you for talking to Al Jazeera.
Thank you, it's been a pleasure.
Always trust.
We ask the question, what is needed in the world?